Happiness is not something that happens by chance. It is not a reward for luck or a result of power. Happiness does not depend on what happens externally, but on how we interpret things. It is a state that must be prepared, nurtured, and privately protected by each individual. Humans are constantly searching for something that seems obvious yet is the most elusive, a true sense of contentment in life. Society continuously develops, material possessions are abundant, yet why does a feeling of emptiness and unease still haunt the majority? While expectations of happiness soar, reality is full of paradoxes. The closer one gets to the goal, happiness seems to recede one step further. If we look at human history, we see unprecedented material progress, but hand in hand with it is an increasing sense of anxiety, instability, and powerlessness when facing a vast, cold, and indifferent universe. No one can intervene in the workings of nature or guarantee a complete future. Each time one danger is overcome, a new, sometimes even fiercer, challenge appears. Cultural shields like religion, tradition, philosophy, and art once helped people feel safe amidst chaos. But with time, they too faded, no longer strong enough to explain and protect the mind from the undercurrents of internal confusion. In this context, people gradually realized that what determines the quality of life is not controlling the external world, but the ability to control inner consciousness, the capacity to create and enjoy every living moment, regardless of circumstances. It is the proactive search for meaning within the everyday flow, instead of perpetually depending on external rewards or recognition. Some choose to bury themselves in societal goals. Others seek escape through material possessions, power, or temporary pleasures. But ultimately, only those who learn to tame their personal experiences, finding joy in the smallest actions, truly touch a state of profound freedom and peace. So, does happiness only appear when everything is perfect? Or is it, in fact, the active control and investment of attention into what one chooses that leads to a state of fulfillment? When old societal values and even biological instincts are no longer sufficient as a guiding map, how can each person build a resilient inner space where happiness is no distant dream, but a daily reality? There are long, drawn-out afternoons when people sit amidst material abundance, yet still hear an emptiness knocking rhythmically within their hearts. This void is not new, but as time goes on, it seems to penetrate deeper into every fold of modern life. People live amidst conveniences, but their minds feel as if they are being dragged away by an undercurrent, no longer knowing what they want, no longer understanding why achieved desires still fail to bring peace. From this familiar question, the journey to discover the nature of happiness begins. Happiness is not a gift falling from the sky, nor is it the arrangement of fate. It is the result of a process in which individuals actively direct the flow of their own experiences. Looking back through history, one can see that for centuries, humans relied on cultural umbrellas for protection against chaos. Religion, tradition, communal beliefs once warmed hearts and soothed the anxieties of a vast, indifferent universe. But with time, these umbrellas could no longer shield entirely against the cold winds of a new era. Old values swayed, beliefs fractured, and people found themselves facing a vast but unpredictable space where a sense of disorientation easily enveloped them. We often tell ourselves that with just one more degree, one more sum of money, one more milestone, life will be fine. But the paradox is that the more we achieve, the greater the dissatisfaction. Expectations escalate faster than life's ability to satisfy, leaving the mind feeling perpetually indebted to a future that has not yet arrived. In this whirlwind, people not only feel tired but also adrift. If the universe is indifferent, then joy must be created by humans themselves. And it is at this point that the first light of optimal experience flickers. Over many years of observation, a fascinating phenomenon emerged among those who seemed to find a deeper rhythm of life than the majority. They were not the richest, nor the highest in status. They might be an artist sketching the first lines in the morning, a factory worker finding rhythm in every hand movement, an athlete forgetting fatigue to become one with the motion of their body. Though different, they shared a common state, complete absorption, where there was no noise of the ego, no distraction of time, only the action and the meaning of that action. Their inner flow was not fragmented by anxiety or annoyance. When their minds were clearly directed, everything became clear. This was not a vague, ecstatic state, but an actively guided mental process. Whenever people engaged in an activity challenging enough to draw their attention to a single point, a new form of order appeared within. This order helped dispel the feeling of disintegration that arises when the mind is pulled in too many fragmented directions. From here, people began to feel a joy that was not dependent on luck, but came from their own participation in life. From this perspective, happiness is no longer a distant destination, but the ability to arrange what happens in consciousness so that each moment becomes purposeful. When people are no longer swept away by chaos, they see more clearly what nourishes the soul, what makes them expand themselves, what makes each day a step forward, however small. Gradually, the story of satisfaction no longer revolves around possession, but shifts to inner control. Only by maintaining mastery over the flow of their own experience do people truly know what it means to live. And upon realizing this, they step through another door into how daily consciousness operates, why it is chaotic, and how to re-establish inner order. This door opens to the next realm of discovery, where the nature of the mind is confronted directly, without evasion, so that people understand why they easily lose their way and how they can regain clarity within themselves. As the door to the world of consciousness opens, the first thing that appears is not clarity, but a labyrinth that seems to operate according to its own subtle laws. People often believe they are masters of their every thought, but the truth is far more complex. Consciousness is like a continuous stream, where any small element from the external world can intrude, seize attention, and create a wave of disorder. Just one reproach, an old memory, a vague feeling of something unfinished, and the mind's temperature immediately shifts. Fragile order is broken, intended goals become out of reach, and people fall into a state of inexplicable dispersion. Consciousness has its limits. In each moment, only a small amount of information can be retained, while most is pushed to the periphery. It is precisely because of this limit that attention becomes life's most precious asset. Those who know how to place their attention in the right place, maintaining it long enough, can create moments of order, thereby building a meaningful life. Those who let their attention be dragged away by the chaotic current will find themselves constantly battling feelings of powerlessness and annoyance. An unguided mind is like a room with open windows, where a cold wind can sweep in at any time and wipe away tranquility. At the core of consciousness exists a structure called the self. This self is not a fixed form, but rather a network of memories, desires, goals, and experiences, all interwoven and changing over time. When the flow of experience proceeds smoothly, the self becomes strong, directed, and knows who it is. But when anxiety-provoking events appear, when psychological energy is drawn into inescapable concerns, the self becomes fragile, vulnerable, and fragmented. Inner chaos, or psychological entropy, is precisely when our inner goals become misaligned, no longer harmonious, causing consciousness to feel pulled in many opposing directions. But it is also from this very mechanism that a special ability emerges. When people focus their attention on a goal-oriented activity, the mind gradually regains order by channeling energy to a single point. Distracting information is eliminated, dispersion vanishes. In its place is a continuity that makes people feel they are entering a strangely sharp state. There, they no longer feel disturbed by external thoughts because the entire weight of consciousness is placed on the immediate action. Order is established not because circumstances change, but because of how people control their attention. This ordering not only helps reduce stress, but also expands the boundaries of the self. Each time people accept a challenge appropriate to their abilities and pour all their mental energy into it, the self develops a new layer. A sense of progress, however small, makes us feel different than before. This is growth that comes not from words, but from each moment people re-establish consciousness over time. These moments accumulate into a powerful capacity for living, helping people resist mental chaos. In the realm of thought, no experience spontaneously becomes joy. Joy only appears when the immediate activity provides conditions for attention to converge completely. When inner experience and external action merge, consciousness enters a smooth state, where every step forward is meaningful. This is not indulgence, nor is it momentary satisfaction, but a goal-oriented flow. The mind, then, is like water finding its proper stream, no longer crashing haphazardly against rocks. In many observations of life, this is clearly evident. A person working under stress often takes hours to complete a task, while a highly focused person can finish in a short time, maintaining joy throughout the process. The difference lies not in innate ability, but in how they control their consciousness. With the same activity, a person with inner order will move lightly in the flow of action, while a person carrying chaos will feel as if they are dragging a heavy stone with every step. And at this very moment, an important concept emerges: the harmony between challenge and skill. If the task is too easy, the mind becomes bored. If it is too difficult, the mind becomes anxious. Only when the challenge is commensurate with ability does the flow of experience become seamless. This is the intersection between the nature of consciousness and the foundation of enjoyment in life. When people find this delicate balance, they feel a distinct mental quality, where each moment becomes a unit of order, no longer dominated by time or pressure. In this new order, the self does not disappear but becomes sharper. The feeling of agency overflows, and people begin to understand that happiness does not depend on external circumstances, but lies in the ability to control the flow of consciousness. When consciousness finds harmony, it paves the way for a unique kind of joy, deeper than mere pleasure, a joy that makes people want to continue exploring themselves and the world more deeply. This joy is not the ultimate reward, but a sign that a journey is heading in the right direction. As order begins to emerge in consciousness, another question naturally arises: what truly makes people enjoy life? Not every pleasant moment brings deep satisfaction. There are fleeting pleasures that make one temporarily forget worries, but when the experience ends, the feeling of emptiness returns. Conversely, there are moments of tension, requiring effort, but which afterward leave a strong impression and make people feel they are living more fully. The difference between these two types of experiences is the key to understanding the quality of life. Pleasure comes when a biological need is satisfied. It soothes the body but does not expand the mind. People feel comfortable, but nothing fundamentally changes within. Developing joy, however, is different. It appears when people use their full mental capacity to solve a challenge that is within reach, and through that, they touch a sense of progress. This joy not only soothes, but also creates a new layer for the self, as if one has stepped through a door they didn't know existed before. In these moments, a unique mental structure is formed. Before one's eyes, goals become clear, not vague, not mixed with countless other unfulfilled aspirations. This clarity is the foundation that helps the mind focus. When knowing exactly what one is doing and why, people easily eliminate fragmented thoughts. This focus is not forced but appears naturally, like a psychological reaction when an activity is engaging enough to capture full attention. For developing joy to emerge, people also need immediate feedback from their actions. This feedback helps them adjust each step and maintain the feeling of getting closer to the goal. An artist hears the subtle changes of each brushstroke. A musician recognizes the vibration of a string. A programmer sees code running smoothly. Each of these signals tells the mind that effort is yielding results, helping to maintain order in the flow of consciousness. At the same time, self-control becomes an important pillar. When people feel they control their actions, they also feel they master the experience. This is not boundless freedom, but agency within the limits of the current task. This state makes the mind lighter, not because it is loose, but because it is firmly guided. This self-control is not a grand declaration, but a silent feeling spreading within, as if everything is in its right place. Another interesting thing also happens in these moments. The sense of self fades. People no longer separate themselves from the action. They don't think about themselves, don't judge themselves, don't wonder how they look in the eyes of others. The self, which often intrudes between every experience, temporarily quiets down. However, when the experience ends, the self does not disappear but returns stronger, expanded by the very things one has just accomplished. Time also changes its appearance in moments of deep enjoyment. When action and consciousness merge, people no longer perceive each passing second. Time can be stretched or compressed. An hour can fly by like a few minutes, or a few minutes can become as dense as an hour. This change does not come from the external environment, but from the internal structure of consciousness when it achieves seamlessness. When all these elements combine, the experience becomes a self-sustaining motivation. People do not work for external rewards, but because the action itself is meaningful enough. This is the foundation of a life rich in mental energy, because when the reward comes from the process itself, people can continuously regenerate joy without waiting for grand achievements. In this state, they are not dependent on the unpredictable elements of life and do not need strong stimuli to maintain a sense of being alive. Observations from life clearly demonstrate this. A craftsman can spend hours absorbed in a small detail of their work. A mountaineer can tirelessly traverse a rock face just to touch a narrow peak. Someone learning a new skill can repeat a movement to the point of losing track of time. They don't do it for praise, nor for status. They do it because that very moment brings the fulfillment their mind is seeking. The most important thing is that this form of joy contributes to elevating the quality of life. Each moment of enjoyment not only brings a pleasant experience, but also reorganizes the structure of consciousness, making it more resilient to chaos over time. Such moments make people more proactive, more confident, and better able to adapt to change. The mind gradually becomes an orderly space where goals are arranged and mental energy is used effectively. When people realize that joy does not come from satisfying needs, but from expanding themselves through effort, they begin to see life in a different light. Instead of seeking comfort, they seek challenges that stimulate focus and enrich themselves. This is the turning point that leads them to the next parts of the journey, where flow is present not only in the mind, but also in the movement of the body, in the senses, in labor, in thought, and in every form of life. There are moments in life when one suddenly feels uplifted, as if every internal and external movement aligns along a single axis. This state does not appear randomly. It is the result of a subtle process where the mind and the external world meet in an orderly structure. For this state to become a reality, certain conditions must be met. When people understand these conditions, they begin to unlock the door to inner flow without waiting for luck to strike. One of the most important conditions is the clarity of goals. When one knows exactly what they are doing, the mind immediately narrows its focus and channels energy in a single direction. Goals do not need to be grand, but they must be specific and structured, making one feel they are progressing towards something meaningful. In a modern life full of distractions, this clarity helps the mind find an anchor. When people are vague, the flow of consciousness becomes fragmented. But when goals are sharp, consciousness immediately gathers into a strong current. Along with goals, people need immediate feedback to adjust their actions. Without feedback, the mind is like walking in the dark, unsure if it is heading in the right direction. Feedback does not always come from others. It can come from the body's own movements, from the sound of a rhythm, from the solution to a problem, from the subtle changes in the work being done. When feedback appears continuously, consciousness has a hook to latch onto, and the flow is sustained more robustly. Another essential condition is the balance between challenge and skill. If the challenge is too low, boredom floods in. If the challenge is too high, anxiety takes over. People truly merge into the flow only when the challenge precisely matches their current capabilities, forcing them to exert effort but without feeling helpless. This balance is like the perfect tension of a guitar string, just a slight deviation, and the sound becomes distorted. In life, too, people feel life most clearly when their efforts are just enough to expand themselves without breaking their inner structure. When these three foundational conditions converge, people easily enter deep concentration. This is not a strained concentration, but a natural immersion. The mind stops fragmenting. Excess thoughts fall to the bottom of consciousness, leaving only a direct line connecting action and attention. In this state, distractions that usually cause turmoil suddenly become distant. People do not force themselves to concentrate. They simply no longer have a reason to be distracted. When concentration reaches its highest level, a subtle shift occurs. A sense of mastery forms. People clearly feel they are in control of the situation, not in the sense of dominating circumstances, but in grasping the rhythm of the experience. Actions no longer push them into a reactive state. Instead, they interact with the situation proactively. This feeling brings a quiet confidence, a sense of peace even within the process of effort. From here, the awareness of the self begins to recede, not disappearing, but resting. People no longer observe themselves, no longer compare, no longer judge. They do not think of themselves as a character doing something, but simply exist within that action. This releases a large amount of mental energy that is usually expended on ego-related anxieties. As a result, the mind maintains greater continuity and the flow becomes smoother. As this immersion continues, time transforms. It no longer flows in the usual way. Sometimes a few minutes carry the weight of an entire hour. Sometimes an hour passes as if only the echo of a moment remains. Time in the state of absorption is no longer an objective unit of measurement, but the internal pulse of consciousness. This change does not come from any supernatural factor, but from the very mechanism of the mind when it achieves maximum order. Those who frequently live in this flow are rarely those with the most favorable conditions. They can be miners, migrant workers, people living in harsh conditions, but in their work, they find a clear structure, a specific challenge, a continuous series of feedback. It is these elements that make them feel a spiritual richness that external circumstances cannot take away. They are proof that a fulfilling experience does not depend on circumstances, but on whether people find order in their own activities. And while many seek joy in distant places, those who understand the conditions of flow find it right in their daily work, because they have learned that life only becomes meaningful when consciousness is organized in a clear direction, where every effort is absorbed into a continuous flow of concentration and discovery. People begin to gradually understand the conditions that create flow in the mind. Another door opens, leading to their own bodies. The body is not just a means of movement, but also the place where the material of experience is crafted every day. In the rhythm of breath, the rhythm of steps, the sensation at the fingertips, or the movement of muscles, all hide the potential to create inner order. When the body is engaged in a purposeful activity with rules and challenges, it becomes a machine continuously producing moments of absorption that people rarely recognize. Looking at life, countless examples can be seen. A person jogging in the morning is not just moving their legs, they are moving through layers of conscious chaos. Each breath, each time the foot touches the ground, each shortened distance is a feedback signal. And as the body moves steadily, the mind is placed in a clear orbit. Disordered thoughts gradually fall to the periphery. The runner no longer pursues thoughts, they pursue their rhythm. This creates a continuity that makes time vague, and the action itself becomes more vivid than any emerging thought. Many ancient cultures knew how to leverage this. The long-distance running rituals of the Tarahumara or the physical and mental races of nomadic tribes were all based on a common principle. The human body, when placed in a repetitive but purposeful challenge, will reorganize its inner state. It is no coincidence that many communities found sacred connection through movement. They understood that when the body moves and the mind focuses on that movement, people can touch a deep layer of experience that words cannot describe. In modern environments, this remains true. A swimmer plunging into the water feels the subtle changes of the current. The water is not just an environment but feedback. Each arm stroke, each leg kick creates a sense of progression. The swimmer does not think about themselves, they only know the rhythm of the water, the rhythm of their body, and the distance gradually closing. All unnecessary things are swept away. In each movement, they precisely know what needs adjustment. This concentration creates a form of silence in consciousness that very few other experiences can provide. But the body does not only create flow through vigorous movement, subtle movements also bring a similar structure. A dancer controls each joint of their fingers, each small movement of their spine. A mountaineer feels each handhold on the rock face. A martial artist adjusts their center of gravity according to the opponent's movement. Each action demands complete presence. When the body is fully engaged, the mind is placed in a continuous flow of tasks. The senses become sharper. The perception of space and time becomes more concrete and real. It is important to understand that the body does not create flow by itself if the mind does not participate. Unconscious, repetitive movements without purpose only create fatigue or boredom. But when people are aware of each step, when they put purpose and rhythm into it, the body becomes a gateway to order. This explains why a person doing strenuous work but knowing how to adjust their pace can still feel engaged, while a person doing simple movements but lacking purpose easily feels exhausted. The difference lies in how they connect mind and body. The senses also play a crucial role. When eyes, Ears, touch, taste, and smell are trained to perceive the world more subtly. They become tools that bring information into consciousness in a structured way. A person who knows how to listen to the deep sounds within a piece of music, one who observes the movement of light across water, one who feels the smallest change in their breath, are all using their senses in a way that creates order. As the senses are refined, the world becomes richer, and that richness helps people delve deeper into experience. In many cases, the harmony between body and mind is stronger than any external reward. Climbers do not seek the summit, they seek the sensation of each step gripping the rock. Yoga practitioners do not seek muscle relaxation, they seek the sensation of breath and the stability of consciousness. Martial artists do not seek victory, they find flow in every movement that requires absolute precision. When body and mind merge, the rest of the world disappears, and people feel placed in a state of almost absolute clarity. Therefore, the body, if used correctly, can become the place where people cultivate the deepest mastery of experience, from vigorous movement to gentle motion, from subtle senses to the rhythm of breath. Every activity can become a door to flow if it is placed within a system of goals, feedback, and focus. When people fully explore this capacity of the body, they realize that the body is not just a means of existence, but also the foundation for building inner order. And from that foundation, they can enter another space, where thought can also become a powerful flow, no less than any physical movement. Having realized that the body can become a bridge leading them into a state of clarity, another realm of experience begins to appear, more subtle, more abstract, but no less profound: the realm of thought. If movement makes the body merge into a rhythm, then thought makes the mind merge into a structure of meaning. And when the mind is set on an orderly intellectual task, the flow of thought appears with a power no less than any physical movement. Thought, at first glance, seems to be something that is always present and requires no special conditions to operate, but reality is different. There are times when the mind is sluggish, interrupted, jumping from one thought to another. Sometimes it's like a river that has broken its banks, spilling in all directions without reaching its destination. But when thought is placed within a goal-oriented structure, it becomes a continuous river where every bend has a reason. This is when the flow of thought appears. Intellectual activities do not just require knowledge, they demand the complete involvement of the mind and a system of rules. When a person solves a math problem, they are not just finding an answer, they are following a strict sequence of rules and feedback. Every step closer to the solution provides a signal that the direction is correct. This chain of feedback creates order for thought, making the mind stick to a clear path instead of drifting in chaos. Similarly, when a scientist pursues a hypothesis, they enter an intellectual game with its own structure. Questions lead to assumptions, assumptions lead to experiments, experiments lead to analysis. Each step requires focus, and every result, whether success or failure, is a form of feedback that helps them adjust. In this process, absorption does not come from simplicity, but from seeing oneself gradually expanding understanding of the world. Those passionate about language also experience this when they follow the rhythm of words. When one linguistic structure flows into another, when meaning is expanded through layers of imagery, they feel the smoothness of the stream of thought. That is when the mind is both clear and exists in a space full of discovery. Language is not just a tool, but an open system for the mind to glide along the curves of meaning. In art, absorption appears when the creator envisions a mental form they wish to bring into the world. They pursue that form through every line, every subtle adjustment, every change in perspective. Thought becomes a flow, and the artist becomes the guide for that very flow. Sometimes they feel as if the drawing or melody leads them, rather than them controlling it. In reality, this is not surrender but complete integration between thought and action. For those who love history or philosophy, flow appears when a grand question opens a chain of other questions. Each question leads them into a new area of meaning. Each area, in turn, opens another bright region, and in that journey, thought becomes a path without an end, yet every step brings a sense of progress. They don't walk to reach a summit, they walk to see new landscapes of knowledge. An important factor in intellectual activity is the ability to self-generate goals. Those who delve deeply into thought do not wait for tasks to come to them. They pose questions themselves, determine the next steps themselves. These goals do not have to be grand, but they provide anchors for the mind. While amateurs are often driven by external demands, truly passionate individuals know how to create their own structure to keep their stream of thought coherent. The difference between a specialist and an amateur is not in intelligence, but in the ability to self-organize the flow of their experience. The specialist understands that thought also needs rules of engagement, just as sports need rules. And when they step onto the intellectual playing field with complete initiative, they easily achieve absorption. At that point, they are not dominated by time or doubt. The mind expands with every solution, every argument, every unexpected connection between ideas. Thought achieves harmony, and the sense of self once again recedes. The thinker no longer sees themselves as an individual struggling amidst information. They become part of the very flow of meaning they are exploring. In this state, thinking is no longer a forced effort but a natural movement. People feel they are growing from within, not by power but by clarity. Therefore, intellectual activity, even without obvious physical movement, can create a state of profound wholeness. People can sit still for hours, but in their minds they are moving at the speed of expanding ideas. They do not leave their position, yet they cross more horizons than any journey. And when they complete this journey, the self returns larger, stronger, clearer. The body has opened the door to flow, and thought has also opened another door. People begin to realize that optimal experience does not belong to just one domain. It is how consciousness finds order in any space action, sensation, or thought. And when these two doors open together, people can advance to another deeper layer of flow, where every part of life is reconnected by a circuit of meaning. People understand that both the body and thought can become a flow. They return to where they spend most of their lives, work. Whether they want to or not, most of a person's time is spent in labor. And precisely because of this, the quality of experience in this activity has the power to shape the entire inner world. But the paradox is that even though many people feel most alert and focused when working, they dream of escaping work to rest. In that gap, people often confront an uncomfortable truth. Free time, when disorganized, leads to more chaos than any work pressure. Work, in its essence, is neither good nor bad. It only becomes a burden when people are pushed into activities without clear goals, without feedback, or without requiring skill. But when work carries conditions similar to what creates flow, it suddenly becomes a place where people find mental coherence. It is important to emphasize that it is not the type of work that determines flow, but how the mind organizes that activity into an orderly process. In many real-life stories, there are people who work in harsh environments yet find deep joy. Miners, despite facing darkness and risk, can still feel they are mastering every operation. They set small goals within each task, monitor every feedback signal, and grasp the rhythm of the work. Under such conditions, they enter a state of flow without needing luxury or comfort. They find a sense of mastery right within the difficulty. There are migrant workers, living in poverty, but each day they create a clear structure for their tasks. Every action is seen as a small step forward. This proactive organization prevents them from being swept into the vagueness of passing time. For them, work is not just about survival, but also an opportunity to feel they are progressing, perfecting themselves, existing consciously. There are also jobs with inherent structures that naturally facilitate flow. A surgeon entering an operating room faces a series of clear goals, continuous feedback, and challenges requiring high skill. Every action is a step in a process they fully understand. A programmer writing code pursues every small bug and immediately sees the result of their adjustments. Such jobs, when done with passion and concentration, become places where people experience profound vitality. But another type of work still exists: repetitive, monotonous tasks that do not require subtle skills. For this type of work, flow only appears when the worker themselves creates challenges. They set goals for speed, accuracy, or simply find ways to optimize a small operation in a series of repetitive actions. When they set their own rules for the game, work becomes a mental game, and boredom is replaced by engagement. The most notable paradox in this section is that people often experience the deepest concentration at work, yet they attribute to work the image of obligation. When working hours end, they enter free time with the expectation of freedom. But unstructured freedom becomes fertile ground for dispersion. Without goals, without feedback, without challenges, free time easily becomes a dull and disorienting void. Therefore, many people only truly feel clear when they are busy. The meaning of this section lies in the realization that work, if organized correctly, can become a source of flow more potent than any recreational activity. When people learn to set goals for each workday, to seek signs of progress, to feel the subtlety in each step, they transform work from a cage into a place that nurtures growth. Work can become a space that clarifies the mind if people do not view it as coercion, but as a place to channel mental energy into an orderly structure. Work can already be flow. The next question arises: what happens when people leave work and confront themselves? Loneliness, relationships, family, and community all become the next testing ground. If work is the easiest part for people to organize, then the inner world and social connections are where flow requires an entirely different subtlety to emerge. Stepping out of the work environment, people face a much more complex reality: their own presence and the presence of others. If work provides us with a clear structure, then private life and relationships operate at unpredictable rhythms. Here, flow no longer depends on the rhythm of tasks, but on the ability to reorganize the inner world. And it is at this point that people can find themselves caught between two opposing forces: loneliness and the need to connect. For many, loneliness is a frightening space. When the noise of work disappears, the mind confronts unstructured voids. Obligations, schedules, and goals no longer envelop consciousness as before. In that silence, fragmented thoughts easily take control, pulling people towards mental chaos. But remarkably, in that same loneliness, if people know how to reorganize their rhythm of life, they can find a form of order that no other space provides. Many examples in life show that loneliness can become a source of spiritual nourishment if organized correctly. A person living alone in the wilderness, as in stories from original sources, is not overwhelmed by the emptiness because their every day is built around purposeful activities. They create order in very small things, dividing time for tasks, arranging objects, turning the surrounding landscape into directional cues. In that rhythm of life, every action has its place. Loneliness is no longer an empty void, but becomes a foundation for concentration. This self-established rhythm of life creates a series of subtle feedbacks. A small task completed, an item placed in its right spot, a space tended to become silent affirmations that the person is still moving forward. These feedbacks help consciousness avoid dispersion, maintain coherence, and thus generate flow. The crucial point is not the grandeur of the goal, but the ability to transform everyday actions into an orderly system. However, people do not live by loneliness alone. They seek the presence of others, longing to connect, longing to share. But this is also where flow is most easily broken. Relationships do not follow fixed rules. Family, friends, community can all be sources of spiritual nourishment, but also places that create much turbulence. Emotional shifts, conflicts, expectations, careless words, or invisible distances can all directly impact consciousness. Therefore, to experience continuity in relationships, people need to organize them in a purposeful way. In families, this appears when everyone participates in common activities that require focus: cooking together, playing a game, building a plan, tending a small garden. Structured activities create harmony among members, and that harmony becomes the foundation for collective flow. When everyone moves toward a common goal, the atmosphere among them suddenly becomes clearer, and vague tensions become easier to manage. In friendships, the same thing happens. Lasting relationships exist not just through shared emotions, but through goal-oriented common activities. Two friends learning a skill together, exploring a new place together, or pursuing a small project together often have a deeper bond. Flow here does not just appear within one person, but within the coordination between two individuals. Such moments give friendships depth and foster growth, rather than just being a refuge. On a broader level, communities can also create flow when they provide people with a common purpose. A group building a structure together, a club striving to maintain an activity, or a community preserving a tradition. In these contexts, each individual feels feedback not only from their own actions, but from the collective rhythm itself. This harmony makes them no longer feel lost in the crowd. But when structure is lacking, relationships easily become places where mental entropy develops fastest. A family that does not actively engage together is easily fragmented by chaotic information flows. A group of friends lacking purpose easily falls into passive interaction, leading to boredom or subtle tension. A community without shared activities easily disintegrates, leaving individuals feeling isolated even amidst many people. At this point, the truth becomes clear. Loneliness and relationships are not opposites but complementary. Loneliness creates space for inner order. Relationships create collective flow. But in both cases, flow only appears when there is structure, goals, and active participation of consciousness. People can find clarity in loneliness or in community, but only when they know how to arrange these two worlds according to the same principle, keeping consciousness from fragmenting. Having learned how to organize work and how to arrange their inner world and relationships, people stand before their biggest challenge, confronting true chaos. Events can shatter all structures in an instant: tragedy, accidents, illness, loss. They don't wait for people to be ready. They strike, disrupting the rhythm of life, severing the lines people have painstakingly drawn. And at that very moment, life's greatest question arises. Can humans create flow even when the world crumbles beneath their feet? Unexpected events strike. They don't ask how mentally prepared people are. An accident, a diagnosis of a severe illness, an irreplaceable loss, the collapse of something thought to be stable all can shatter the mental structure people have built. This is a form of chaos that any internal system finds difficult to withstand, for it not only causes pain, but also severs sources of feedback, eliminates goals, and pushes people into an empty space where time stretches in the heaviest and coldest way. And at this very point, the challenge to consciousness becomes most profound. Some people are suddenly stripped of their mobility by an accident. They see their old life crumble. The most ordinary things suddenly become impossible challenges. In the early days, they only see themselves thrown into an empty space where all purpose vanishes and the future becomes blurred. But with time, some begin to do what they themselves never expected. They restructure the broken life. They learn to set new, small but clear goals. They treat every remaining small movement of their body as a challenge. Very slow progress, sometimes just lifting a light object, becomes a source of feedback that helps them feel they are still alive and can still move forward in their own way. In these stories, people learn that chaos, however cruel, can still become a place to rebuild consciousness. When everything external collapses, the only thing left is how people reorganize the flow of their mental energy. If they let it drift in pain and inescapable anxiety, consciousness will be swallowed. But if they find a new goal, however small, find a new challenge within the limitations of their circumstances, they can create a new flow that fits their current conditions. Those who survive and thrive after tragedy are proof of this ability. From this perspective, chaos is no longer humanity's enemy, but another kind of environment where the mind is forced to reorganize itself according to new principles. Just as self-organizing structures in nature only form in states of instability, people can also develop in a similar way when facing adversity. They no longer rely on old habits, but must find new ways to divide attention, reset goals, and identify signs of progress. Every small step forward in that environment becomes proof that their consciousness still has the capacity to create order. A person who loses their sight can learn to perceive the world through hearing and touch. A person who loses the ability to use their legs can find flow in training the remaining parts of their body. A person who loses a loved one can begin to find structure in the small tasks of a new life. These stories are not meant to sugarcoat adversity, but to show that people have the ability to recreate the conditions for flow even in the most extreme situations. They do not turn tragedy into something good, but they turn it into material to continue living without allowing consciousness to be completely devoured. But even if people can create order within chaos, there remains a deeper question. Do all these efforts connect in a single direction? Because if each flow is just an isolated moment, if each activity only brings temporary concentration, then life will ultimately become a fragmented series of disparate experiences. What people seek is not just moments of absorption, but an overarching structure to understand where those experiences lead them and why. Therefore, people need a sense of guiding meaning. Meaning does not come from outside. It is created when people reflect on their experiences and see a continuous thread running through them. A person can view their career, relationships, failures, and even tragedies as parts of a larger story. When that story takes shape, every flow has its place in the whole. From then on, consciousness not only achieves order in each moment, but achieves long-term order throughout life. The purpose here is not to idealize life, but to create a center for the mind to revolve around. When people have a long-term purpose, they easily arrange daily experiences into their proper place. A small difficulty becomes a challenge to overcome. A small success becomes a signal that the direction is still correct. Even great losses can be placed into the story as a turning point instead of an end. Purpose does not erase pain, but it helps people know where to view that pain in the broader picture. Those who know how to create purpose are not only better able to weather storms, they are also able to transform every experience into a part of their growth. Those who pursue knowledge focus on understanding the world, and every flow of thought connects back to that goal. Those who dedicate themselves to the community know that every action they take is linked to a social meaning. Those who pursue creativity know that every moment of artistic absorption is a step forward in their long journey. Each purpose becomes a vertical axis for consciousness to cling to. Ultimately, people understand that flow is merely a means. What they truly seek is not temporary comfort, but a structured life, where every experience is a step in a unified journey. Order lies not just in a single moment, but in how those moments connect to form a unique story. And it is that story where people create meaning for their lives. In the journey of seeking meaning, people often fall into invisible traps. The trap of endless expectations, the trap of believing that simply achieving something will naturally bring contentment. But then, each time a milestone is reached, the moment of joy quickly passes, giving way to a new aspiration, another higher peak, and thus, happiness slips further from grasp. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies in the fact that happiness is not the end of the road, but how each person walks, feels, and creates experiences at every stage of life's journey. We cannot wait for perfection, nor can we escape imperfection. It is in moments of confronting chaos, of unexpected changes, that the ability to control consciousness and transform each moment into a personal masterpiece becomes humanity's special power. It is an uncompromising initiative defining one's own values, sowing one's own joy, rewriting one's own life story despite all the noise from society, media, or even primal instincts. Looking back, how many times have we been swept into endless races, struggling with the pressure to succeed, to stand out, to meet the expectations of family, society, or the immature self within each person? How many times have you sat amidst countless modern conveniences yet felt lost, missing something you couldn't name? The more you tried to grasp, the emptier it felt, like holding water flowing through your fingers. Perhaps the key lies in stopping, asking yourself, what truly matters? What are the moments that make you truly alive, feeling time stand still and everything merging into a natural flow, free from worry? It could be a peaceful morning with coffee, a moment lost in music, or absolute concentration while solving a difficult problem. These seemingly small experiences hold the power to transform one's perception of life itself. We always stand between two opposing forces. On one side, the chaos and uncertainty of the world. On the other, the ability to organize and control the flow of personal consciousness. No one can clear all obstacles, nor is there any magic potion that will turn life into paradise with a single choice. But every moment you dedicate your full attention to the present, every time you appreciate both the ordinary and the arduous challenges, every time you cultivate the skill of mastering consciousness, that is when you are mastering the greatest game of your life. Ask yourself, if you cannot change the world, will you change how you feel about it? Will you continue to let your consciousness drift like a leaf in a flood, or will you learn to steer, even if it's in a tiny boat on the vast ocean? Do you dare to question all the values you once believed in, to experiment with new ways of organizing your inner life instead of constantly seeking external rewards? And if one day you realize you have been bound by habit, instinct, or social obligations, will you choose to rise up or continue to settle for the comfort zone of repetition? No one can answer for you, for happiness, like true freedom, is always a personal conquest that cannot be copied or fully transmitted. You can borrow inspiration, learn methods, even experiment with entirely new value systems. But only by practicing, failing, and rising again will you grasp the ultimate secret: controlling consciousness, creating personal flow, and finding meaning where it seemed meaningless. The time has come for each person to ask, will we let our life experience be dictated by external circumstances and instinct, or will we proactively rewrite the definition of happiness in our own way? Do you dare to choose mastery instead of being swept away?